This is Kelly Pickle, assisting with the oral history program with the Battleship New Jersey in Camden, New Jersey. Today is Monday, August 5th, 2019. We are on board the Battleship New Jersey, and our interview guest is Paul Seitz from Hamilton, New Jersey. Mr. Seitz served on the New Jersey during the 1980s commission as a gunner's mate in Turret 2. Welcome home, Mr. Seitz.
Thank you.
So to get the interview started, what is your current age?
51.
Okay. When did you first enlist?
April of 1987.
Okay. And how old were you when you joined the Navy?
19.
What was your inspiration for joining the Navy?
College didn't work out, and my dad said, well, what's it going to be? And a week later, I decided to go to the recruiter and look to see what opportunities were in the Navy, and I joined up just a couple days after.
Is there any reason you chose the Navy over the other branches?
Yes, my dad was in the Navy.
Okay.
So it was really no question. It was just the direction I was going to go.
Okay. Where did you go for boot camp?
Great Lakes, Illinois.
Do you have any stories from your time in boot camp you'd like to share?
Navy boot camp was more knowledge-based about the history of the Navy, shipboard life, different from the fact whereas Marine boot camp is a lot more strenuous and strict and physical fitness-wise and things like that. But Navy boot camp was just filled with Navy classes and knowledge on the history.
Okay. What was it like being at Great Lakes? I heard stories about the weather and things like that.
I got lucky going in April. Boot camp was only 8 weeks long, and then right after boot camp, I went to A school, which is in Great Lakes, and electronics school, which lasted until November. So I didn't have to endure the cold season, unlike some of my friends. But Great Lakes was fun. Everything was good about it. I can't remember not one complaint about Great Lakes. It was just as good as could be.
Okay. Do you have any stories from A school then, since you mentioned?
Well, prior to going to A school, we had to go through what was called BEE at the time, Basic Electricity and Electronics. And the joke of it was no gunner's mate can graduate from BEE because it was a self-taught class. They had a proctor in the class, but you walked in, they gave you a booklet, which was called a mod. You read it, you went and took the test at a computer, which I think the computer's name was Fred, was everybody's joke. And Fred either passed you or failed you. If you failed, you had to take it again. If you didn't do well again, then you went to voluntary extra study and then mandatory. And if not, then they sent you to the fleet. So it was a completely self-taught course. And you just did mod after mod after mod, and different ratings had to do different number of mods. Like I think I had to go to number 19, whereas I think fire control went to 22. But it was, if you wanted to have a good job in the Navy, I mean, you had to do it. You had to be motivated for yourself because nobody helped you. The proctor in there would tell you if the spelling was right, and they give you like just a bare minimum of guidance on a question, but it was all up to you. And then once you graduated from BEE, you went over to the A school, which was the big greenhouse in Great Lakes, and had all the missile and gun systems in there. And in there, you were taught by proctors, and you learned more electronics, motors, generators, hydraulics, pneumatics, and a big part of it was their history, their experience with the Navy, because most of them were prior military, and they gave you a lot of insight, just things to do and not to do on board of a ship that you never would have known if the guy didn't mention it in his class.
Okay. So after A school, where did you go?
From A school, I went to Long Beach. Actually, at the end of A school, you had, how well you did in the class. You got to pick your orders. The last class of your graduation, they would put all the orders for every ship, wherever they were, on the board. First person in the class got to pick where they wanted to go, and he went down the list. And originally, I was supposed to go to USS Wisconsin, but I don't remember exactly what had happened, but that got changed around that day, the number of orders, and they re-asked me again, do I want to go the East Coast or the West Coast? And being from New Jersey, I decided to go to the West Coast and get on board in New Jersey.
Okay. So you didn't choose the New Jersey, but you were later assigned to it.
I did have a choice in the end on where I wanted to go, and decided on the New Jersey because it was on the West Coast.
Okay. So when you found out you were going to the New Jersey, what was your reaction?
It was exciting. I definitely wanted to be on the West Coast, and being on your state ship was, it added a very interesting point. So I was excited to come out, nervous, excited, first time away from home for the most part, and definitely looking forward to it.
Do you remember your reaction when you first saw it in person?
Words can't really describe that. The ship was so awe-spec. The ship was enormous. I had never seen anything like it before. And it was just, holy cow, look at this thing I'm about to live on. And it was amazing. It was truly amazing.
Could you tell me about your duty stations on board the New Jersey?
Where we went, or?
Tell me just about your daily life. What was it like being on board?
I was in G2 division for Turret 2, and we had a really great division. In port, it was just like a regular 8-hour work day if you didn't have duty. And you got up, you had breakfast, you mustered up in the beginning of the day, and you were given your what's called a PMS card for plane maintenance. And they handed them out, and you went back down, got changed into your coveralls, because working inside the turret, there's oil and grease everywhere. The turrets leaked like a sieve. And you just went to work. You worked all day, and at the end of the day, you did whatever you want. Once you were done, you go off the ship, go do whatever you wanted. It was just like a regular work day in port, and our division was just great. Our G2 division was really, really great. You worked hard in port, and then you were off and out at sea. And I want to get to that in a minute. We worked much more than 8 hours a day. So out at sea, we would work 12, 14, if not more hours during the day. And then once we pulled into port, our chief wouldn't have anything. Everybody was off. Unless you had duty, it was goodbye. No matter what port we were in, G2 division was off.
Okay. Did you have any watch stations that you could tell me about?
Yeah, on duty we had, for weapons divisions, we had to check every magazine all day long, or in the evening, all the magazines had to be checked. And you had to, it was a timed thing. You had to go down into each magazine, and you had a box which had a turn key. And once in the magazine was the key, so you had to open the door, make sure you went in the magazine, get the key, put it in the box, and turn it, and it would leave an impression on the tape in there that says you went inside that magazine. And that watch was every 4 hours. And every once in a while, it had the quarter deck watch or the rear deck watch. So those are mostly. And aside from that, while we had duty, we worked also. Turret 2 division, G2 division, the duty people worked until about 8 o'clock at night because, we worked until things were fixed, and we didn't stop. I can even remember when we pulled into Busan, Captain Katz had said nobody leaves the ship. It was a working port. Nobody was allowed to leave. I mean, nobody. And somehow I think Commander Lore came down and said, disappear, you guys are off. and we were the only 9 people who left the ship that day. We didn't know why. I mean, all the tours went through turret 2, so our turret was always clean and working. Because when something broke, which things did, we didn't stop working at all until it was fixed, all through the day, all through the night. And I remember out at sea, we're up for 48 hours straight working on a piece of equipment until it got fixed.
Why was no one else allowed to go on board
Because
to the port?
Captain Katz loved G2 Division.
Okay.
For whatever reason, he brought all his guests in turret 2, and he was a very friendly guy, very personable, friendly. He said hi to everybody. If you passed him, he said hi to you, and you recognized that he said hi. And we were his turret, and he, I hate to say it, but he loved us. I mean, he came in and everything, whatever he wanted, obviously got done. But we were happy to do for him. And the turret was always spotless, clean, and working. We were always online.
Did you have any personal interactions with him?
A lot, because during the mess cooking days, we were in the wardroom. I was in the wardroom, so got to see him quite often, and the executive officer and all the other officers. My division officer, when I first got on, his name was Brian Gleason. He made arrangements for me to be up in the wardroom for my mess cooking days, which was just great duty. That's where I met my friends and had a lot of interaction with all the officers there.
Are there any particular stories, like interactions that you had with the captain that would be memorable to share?
In Australia, he had a couple of very big parties. In Hobart, Tasmania, he had it was a huge party here, and we just served everybody and took care of everybody, all his guests, the way we knew he wanted. The food was great because the cooks in the wardroom were outstanding, and I know he was always happy to have everybody around him. That's the most memorable part. He was very friendly with everybody.
Are there any other stories that you want to share about your life on board the ship? Any
We had
initial ones?
when we were up in the wardroom, and even when we got out of the wardroom, we got to know a couple of officers very well. One in particular was Mr. Palladino. He was the chief warrant officer, and in the wardroom, my officers would come in late at night because we're usually up there until probably like 10 or 11 o'clock at night pretty often. And they would be looking for something, whether it was like, hey, is there any cereal around, or is there any ice cream left, or something like that. And he just talked to us normal, and him in particular told the 4 of us who worked up in the wardroom life lessons about working hard, trusting people, and treating people well on board ship, how things work, things like that. He was a genuinely nice guy who took your interest to heart. He really was a really great guy.
Great. So during your time on board, the ship made several memorable ports of call. The first one that I want to ask you about was in 88. You participated in the South Korea Summer Olympics in Seoul. Do you have any memories of what that was like?
When we pulled into, I'm not sure if that was Incheon or Busan, where that they did tours, but they set up tours for anywhere you wanted to go. And they had the Olympic Stadium tours, and they had buses pull in, and almost no matter where you wanted to go, there was a tour there. And they took you to the Olympic Stadium and all around that area, to Itaewon for shopping, which everybody on board spent every nickel they had shopping in that district. I mean, things were so, I want to say cheap price-wise, but really all your money went there.
Did you get anything memorable?
I bought a lot of dive equipment and things like that, yeah, scuba diving stuff.
Are you
So,
big scuba diving?
At the time I was, because the ship also arranged to have whoever wanted to be certified scuba diving, they arranged to have classes done, and we did that back in Long Beach prior to leaving.
Okay. So did you actually get to see the stadium and all that?
Oh yeah, all around there, walked in and out everywhere. Then they took you to the DMZ, and it was just a great tour, great tours. And the best thing, it didn't cost you anything, nothing. You know, everything was for your taking.
Okay. That same year, the ship participated in the Australia Bicentennial. Do you have any memories from that you'd like to share?
Pure amazing. It was just amazing. It was, I want to say, from day one till the month and a half later we left, however long it was one long party. The people in Australia treated us like gold, absolute gold. I must have had dinner at 15 different people's houses. They had phone booths set up, dial a date. If you wanted to go out with an Australian girl that day, there were 20 phones. All you had to do is pick up the phone, and somebody would come, and you'd go out to dinner and do whatever you wanted. I went to a World's Fair in Brisbane with some friends, and that was really exciting. It was a lot of fun. Something I never would have done, even in the States.
So what was your most memorable part of Australia?
My friend oftentimes would force me to go running through the city because he was a big jogger at the time, although I wasn't. Somehow I got roped into that. But the Australia's most memorable time was Captain Katz had a party in Hobart, Tasmania, and on board came the governor of I'm probably saying the wrong title, councilman or governor of Tasmania. He and his daughter came on, and the next day I was at their house for dinner, and the following day he called my mother and just told her that I was okay and had a good time, and he was happy to meet me, and just a bunch of nice stuff. And it was just pure kindness from the guy. It was just pure kindness, you know. They were happy to treat the American sailors like gold. They were absolutely happy to.
Great. So were there any other memorable ports of call that you've made during that time?
We went to so many ports. I mean, Singapore was fantastic, and again, a lot of shopping there. And honestly, a lot of times we were going out to clubs and bars and restaurants and just killing it. I mean, we had nothing that I remember ever got out of hand or out of control, but we just had the best time in the world, the best. And even I remember in Australia, we left this one restaurant and we had a good time that night, and we were walking back, and a whole bunch of police cars pulled up. Hey, we'll give you guys a ride. And boom, we all got in the police cars, and they drove. We were like a half an hour away. I don't know how we got there, but they just drove us all back to the ship, said, see you later, and that was it, just friendliness. Pattaya Beach, Thailand was a really good time. Just a wrecking ball of the time. It was unbelievable. And for guys who were, 19, 20, 21, all of a sudden be exposed to practically do whatever you want. Things were fun. Things were fun. Some knuckleheads got out of control, but for the most part, it was just a really great time, and everybody was interested in the ship. Everybody. There wasn't a person around who didn't see that ship off their coast or in their port that didn't want to come on board the ship. Everybody did, because it was just a magnificent looking ship.
I did hear about there was an incident in Australia with the Greenpeace movement. Do you have anything you'd like to say about that?
I remember as we were pulling into the harbor, we went under the bridge, and just as we start entering, I mean, there were boats galore of Greenpeace people, and you couldn't even believe they actually held a chain across from boat to boat trying to stop the ship. From one small boat to another small boat in front of our ship, they were holding a chain trying to stop the ship from going into the harbor. And I remember all the police boats around us just literally running them off, just pushing them out of the way for our ship to come in. But aside from that, there wasn't anything that was out of control. I do remember somebody did bring a briefcase on board and leave it in the middle of everything on after the ship. So we had to have our EOD guys x-ray the briefcase and things like that. And it turned out to be nothing, just, I guess, a scare tactic or something like that.
Okay. Sort of going back to the good times and all that you were mentioning, could you tell me about your shellback initiation?
Worst butt whipping I ever had in my life. I mean, it was just, to put it bluntly, I never got my butt whipped so bad. And none of that obviously would fly today.
Mm-hmm.
Things like that just don't go on today. But shellback initiation was, I mean, it was just part of shipboard life. You looked forward to doing it. I mean, while it was going on, you just couldn't wait till it ended. But, I mean, they saved up garbage for weeks and weeks, and you had to crawl through it. You had, I mean, they were just cracking eggs over you, pouring vinegar all over you. You were wading through salt water on the ship, and it started on the below decks, and you started crawling around, and you had to crawl up the steps and literally crawl on your hands and knees around the entire ship while guys with, they called them shillelaghs, which were cut up sections of hose, and they would tape one end of it as a handle, and they would swing it and beat you in the rear end with it. And I mean, you had to get hit like several hundred times. But I mean, that's what the shellback initiation was. And the days before was when King Neptune came on board in his royal court, and we had a beauty pageant and guys on board dressed up. They had all these activities prior to the shellback day. And the guys who weren't shellbacks, there was a day before called Wog Day, because they were called a polywog. And it's when people who weren't shellbacks had a chance to haze the older people who already did it. And you know, there was one incident where this guy in my division, his last name was Dove. They took him and they tied him on board the main deck, and they poured maple syrup all over him. They cut open a pillow and just feathered him, the whole thing. And the next day they paid for it, but it was pretty fun at the time.
Okay. On a not as pleasant note, in '89, the USS Iowa had the explosion. Do you have any memories of when that happened?
Yes, once it happened, we all had to stand down period. And then we in Turret 2, I remember, I don't remember exactly the testing we did with the bags, but we did do testing for the Navy on the powder bags and whatnot to see if they could really self-ignite and things like that, because you know the powder was old that we always used, so they're worried about it exuding the different chemicals that make up the powder grains, and usually that's more volatile than the powder itself. But that was definitely a tough time for people.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, when that did happen, I do remember in turret 2, there was a couple of bosun mates who didn't want to come in the turret after that during general quarters. And I remember our chief had to talk to them about, like, no, this is not going to happen. This is why, and he tried to explain everything to them. But I remember a couple of guys did not want to be in the turret.
After that, in 89 through 90, Admiral Paul Reason commanded Battle Group Romeo on board the USS New Jersey. Do you remember, or did you have any interactions with him when he was on board?
Very little. The only interactions we had was every once in a while, maybe every other day, every couple of days, he'd eat on the mess decks with everybody, and he would just sit down at someone's table and he would just eat with us. I sat at his table once, and you just wanted to talk to the guy. Like, here was like an admiral in the Navy, and you wanted to ask him questions. And I'm sure, I don't remember what they were, but they were just silly questions about this and that, and the Navy and where he went to school and what he's doing and the outlook of the Navy and stuff like that. But that, always, I remember him always saying hi, and friendly enough. His staff was always friendly. That was about it. There was another admiral who came on board. He wore cowboy boots. I think they nicknamed him Bull. I can't quite remember. He again, he wanted the tour of turret 2, and he actually sat down with all of us in turret 2, and he just explained the world to us, what was going on military-wise in the world. And I remember him saying flat out to us, if there's ever going to be a problem in the world, it's going to be with North Korea. He said that's where our focus is going to be. Go figure.
Since you were in turret 2, were you did you ever get to see the 16-inch guns firing?
Twice. I was able to be outside the turret twice. They tried to get guys to see the guns shoot every once in a while if we could manage personnel-wise. So I was able to be outside the guns twice.
What was that like?
Nothing you would ever imagine. What happens is the gun goes off. It's not a bang, it's more of an explosion. Like the 5-inch guns have a cracking, hurtful bang. The 16-inch was, you can hear the metal of the ship rattling, and the fireball comes out, and you just feel all the air rush away from you. And then you just see the projectile flying and hit the water or wherever we're shooting. It was very exciting, very exciting.
How did that compare to, say, when the 5-inch guns were firing and things like that?
Like I said, the 5-inch guns were just like you had to have earplugs in for the 5-inch guns more so because they were like the crack was painful, whereas the 16-inch guns was a much more voluminous bang. So, but the 16-inch guns, everybody wanted to see them fire.
We talked a little bit before about Captain Katz, right? Did you also have interactions with Captain Tucker?
Yes, a bunch of times actually, and they were all good, thank God. One time in particular, we were crawling through the gun barrels for our cannon cocker card, and it's where you opened up the breech inside the turret, and whoever was with you said, "Get in," and you went in, and you literally crawled through the entire barrel. So we were doing that, and one time we were doing that, and general quarter sounded. So I believe I was a second-class petty officer at the time, and so everybody else went to their battle stations. I stayed up there with the guy who was crawling through the barrels, and we were standing on turret 1, top of it, and I just felt like someone was looking at me, and I looked up, and there was Captain Tucker with his arms crossed, just looking at me like a father's looking at his son who's has his hand in a cookie jar or something. And I just looked up, I shrugged my shoulders, and said, "Up, he's inside the barrel." And he just cracked a smile and pulled Officer Purdy out, which was his name. Pulled him out. We waved, and I went to our general quarters stations. The other time, which was really surprising to me, was when I got my ESWAS pin, the Enlisted Surface Warfare Specialist pin, and they made a big deal about it on the ship. It was huge, and there were like 7 of us getting the pin at the time, and we're all stood up there in front of everybody in the wardroom. And he just went down the line and he got to me and he goes, "Huh, Seitz, you're getting one of these? Good job." Gave me, pinned it on me and said, he goes, "See you later," kind of, and that was it. It was, he knew my name, and that was pretty neat.
So, what did you do to earn that pin? Do you know?
It was several months of shipboard study. You went to every workspace and learned how to do, or broad learning how to do of every job on the ship. You knew the steam cycle, all the specs of all the equipment on the ship, and you had to, and guys in those workspaces would give you a class or instruction that day, and then they'd sign off on your book. And at the very end, once you had your book all signed off on, you went before a board of the ship's chiefs, and they just fired questions at you about the ship. They just asked you question after question after question, and to get your pin.
Well, congrats on that.
Thanks.
A few more questions about your time on board. Did you ever travel through the Panama Canal?
No.
Okay. Did you ever cross the Arctic or Antarctic Circle?
We were in the Bering Sea, so I don't think we got that far up there.
Okay.
Because there's a couple other initiations that you do up there. One's called the Blue Nose, and we never did that, so I guess not.
Okay. Did you have any Soviet encounters that were memorable?
Oh, out at sea, I know there were a couple of them, but one I remember in particular was just, I think it was called a bear, would just buzz our ship all the time, just fly right low to the ocean and fly right past our ship. And there was always a trawler off our bow or around us, keep track.
And how did the crew respond to when those happened?
For us, the enlisted guys, it was just like something neat that was going on. That's all, Whereas I guess down in CEC and CIC, I'm sure it was much more of a ordeal.
So, were there any other final stories about your time on board the New Jersey that you'd like to share?
When we were in the Bering Sea, I remember the swells had to be 60 foot deep waves, and the ship would go down and the entire main deck would be underwater, and that was just exciting. It was really, at that time I had been on board the ship a couple of years already, and it was just exciting. It really was, and the ship handled it like there was no problem at all.
Okay. So after the New Jersey, was that the only ship you served on?
Yes.
Okay, so did you leave the Navy after your time was up?
I did some reserve time, and then I got out of my enlistment.
Okay. So when did you get out of the Navy?
December of 1990.
Okay. And what did you do after that?
I became a police officer.
Okay. Anything about your post-Navy career that you'd like to share?
The one thing that made a big impact was in my career as I'm retired now. I'm a retired police sergeant. But during my board for my ESWAS pin, there was an Australian chief who was serving on board. We traded, I guess, with the Australian Navy. And the question he posed to me was, he told me to, in this board, close your eyes and picture yourself on the 11 level. Now tell me everything you see. And I would say something that's there, and he'd ask me a question about that, and I would be able to build off of the first statement. Like he would ask me, okay, I see an antenna on my left. And then I remember him saying, what color is the base of the antenna? I'd say it's blue. So what kind of antenna is it? So it's a passive receiving antenna. And then he'd say, well, what does that do? And then he would just kept building off that one statement. And during investigations of being a cop, that was one thing I always remembered in interviews, on building off everything a person says and asking them another question, what they say. And it makes it very difficult for a person to lie when you're pinpointing them on every single statement.
That's really interesting. Are there any other ways that you felt your naval career, your naval service helped prepare you for police work?
I mean, onboard ship and turret too, it was flat out. We got up, you worked, and you worked hard, and you made sure everything worked. And that really had a huge impact on me after the Navy. You just worked and worked hard for what you wanted. That's really what it came down to. When I got into police work, I mean, coming from the Navy, I was a little more strict than people who were non-military. So that transition was a little bit awkward, but making rank in the police department, I had the privilege as well. It's going to be done my way.
Okay. This isn't your first time coming back to the battleship.
No.
Okay. When was the first time you came back?
Right after it got towed in. I came back literally maybe 2 weeks after it got towed here, and they weren't letting people on board yet. And they found, and I told the person there that I was a previous crew, so he brought me on board, and he brought me down to where my rack was, my bunk, and he asked me if I remembered where it was, and I told him. He brought me down there, and on my rack, when I opened it up, there was still a note from my mother. So it was really exciting. It was she had been dead years old. I mean, a long time. So it was exciting. It really was. It was really just exciting. Made the day.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Now, so this is your second time coming back?
No, I've been here many times. As a matter of fact, last February, not this past February, the February before, my wife rented the ship and had my 50th birthday, surprise birthday party on board the ship. And all my, she got a bunch of Star Tour buses. All our relatives and friends came. She bussed everybody on board the ship and had a surprise party for me. It was really exciting.
How is it coming back each time you do and seeing it as a museum and things like that?
It just brings back every single memory you've ever had. You can remember it once you step on board. You can remember it like it was yesterday. I mean, every day.
I have a note here to ask you about your reserve force experience. Was there a connection with the New Jersey with that?
Yeah, the New Jersey had we had a Marine detachment on board, and we had sailors that supported them. So if there's ever a security breach, we had posts that we had to man in case we had to repel any type of attack on the ship. And this Gunnery Sergeant Brown, Marine Gunnery Sergeant, ran it. And it was a lot of fun. We did tactical training in different buildings and on board ship and stuff like that. And he was a really great guy too. He really was. He actually was talking to me one day about shooting, and I was telling him about my, I'd grown up with guns all my life. He goes, "Oh, I'll have to take you to range," and he actually took me to the range and qualified me for a ribbon. It was just out of pure kindness, he did that just because he took a liking to me.
We're getting close to wrapping up this interview, but are there any other stories or thoughts that you want to share before we get towards that?
There's nothing that compares to shipboard life aboard New Jersey. It was just fantastic duty. We worked hard. We ate fantastic. Our galley crew and the rest of the crew everybody was top notch. If there wasn't a part available for a piece of equipment, they made it. And shipboard life was great. It really was. I don't have not one complaint about shipboard life.
Okay. So for this interview, hopefully in the future, teachers, historians, researchers will be able to look back on this and learn a little bit about you and the ship and American history. Are there any last messages you want to leave for those future viewers?
Go Navy.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this interview then. Thank you for your service and taking the time to join us. This concludes our interview. This is Kelly Pickle working with the Oral History Program on board the Battleship New Jersey in Camden, New Jersey. Today is Monday, August 5th, 2019. Our interview guest was Mr. Paul Seitz from Hamilton, New Jersey. This recording and any transcripts, abstracts, or indexes made from the recordings will be stored in the Oral History Department of the Battleship New Jersey, the Library of Congress Veterans History Project, and the New Jersey State Library System. All recordings will be made available to writers, researchers, teachers, and historians. This is Kelly Pickle, signing off.